Okay, as I mentioned in the intro, there is an important story with a lot of implications to new versus old media related to what we call hashtag CNN blackmail, and we're going to get to that with Jim Hoft and I think Keith Levenberg too. But I want to start off today's show with Doris Wise, whom I've had on here before. She runs Jews Can Shoot, other Second Amendment groups, also children of Holocaust survivors. And you've heard her before, but perfect opportunity because it's July 5th. Because if you know your history, you know that things didn't end on July 4th, 1776 with fireworks. Something happened called the American Revolution, which required a populace that was armed and knew what to do with those weapons. And with that introduction, take it away, Doris.
So at that time, we didn't really have a military, so people were the militia, and they were trained, and everybody had a gun, and that's what we had. It was after that, and after the Civil War, that the Ku Klux Klan got involved. I'm going to talk about gun control.
That's a Democrat group, right? I just wanted to.
Absolutely. The Ku Klux Klan was started by the Democratic Party to operate against the Republican Party. So if it sounds like today, it's because it sounds like today.
Well, I didn't think we were going in this direction, but proceed. It is interesting.
And the purpose of it was to keep guns out of the hands of African Americans so that they would not rise up and revolt, which is what the Second Amendment is about.
Yep.
Rising up and revolting. That's all it's about, by the way. It's not about hunting, and it's not about shooting the bad guy that comes into your house. It is about revolting against government tyranny. That was the whole point of the Second Amendment. So the Ku Klux Klan began as a gun control organization to keep guns out of the hands of slaves that had been emancipated. And now they're still doing it. The Democrats are still doing it. They don't call themselves the Ku Klux Klan, but they're still doing it, and they're doing it for exactly the same purposes. It's to disarm citizens so that they are unable to exercise their Second Amendment rights and cannot respond to a tyrannical government. And so that's where we are today.
But it was more than that. You can't just necessarily teach a populace, give them guns and expect that they'll know what they're doing. I mean, things are different now. People live in cities and suburbs, but people who had lived here, even more so than their cousins in England, living on what was a frontier, knew how to use weapons. I mean, George Washington was surveying wilderness when he was 15 years old.
I didn't know that, but
yeah,
but yes, having a gun and knowing how to use a gun was part of life then. That sort of left us here. A kid doesn't learn how to use a gun, and they certainly can't even take a piece of rye bread or a Pop-Tart and turn it and put it into the shape of a gun anymore. There are some schools.
By the way,
in the
these
South,
are both. Those are thoughts that never even occurred to me when I was eating rye bread or Pop-Tart. Not that I'm anti-Second Amendment. I was just focused on eating the rye bread and Pop-Tart. It shows sometimes when I'm on diet periodically, but it never even occurred to me.
Well, it also it shows that people will improvise ways in this that it's innate that we want to protect ourselves. It's innate. So when you don't, so that's why kids. I'm guessing that's why kids might do that. Because it's innate. So we took it out. It used to be in schools that part of physical education was learning how to use a gun. That's been completely removed, and in the South they're actually bringing it back in some high schools.
I think very interesting. Because Michael Savage actually talks about that in his on his show periodically, and he's a Jew from the Bronx, and in his high school, he's not young.
Mm-hmm.
They had like a riflery team, like literally he was on it after school. I mean, just think about that.
See?
In the Bronx.
Mm-hmm.
Not rural Alabama.
I have friends who grew up here in Santa Monica, California, who also used to learn. They used to take their rifles, sling it on their backs, get on the bus in Santa Monica, and take the bus to a shooting range.
No kidding.
And you know what? And nobody died on that bus.
Well, you've been to Israel. I mean, haven't you? Or you have been to Israel, or you haven't? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about what it's like on a bus there. It's a military where everyone serves pretty much, like from the ages, 18 to 22. And
right.
People, but they're serving not on some remote base, fairly close to where they live. Have you been on a bus in Israel? You see these 19-year-olds walking around with Uzis all the time. It's a weird feeling, and you feel secure.
Well, you have to back up here. First of all, Israel, which is a shock to so many people, has very strict gun control laws.
Right.
I don't know if those Uzis that they're getting on the bus with, if they're not on duty, I don't know if they're loaded, Adam.
Oh. That said, there are a lot of people who want to kill Israelis and Jews in particular. Not all Israelis are Jews. Yet Israel has very few mass shootings because, and when they have had incidents like this, someone's there shooting the perp within about 30 seconds there, no?
No.
What do you mean, no?
It's not true.
It's not? Oh,
look back at I'm not the expert, but I certainly keep up on this because that's very dear to my heart.
Right.
Is if you think about some of the massacres that have happened in Israel at the yeshiva.
Okay, true.
At the yeshiva, not long ago at the cafe. Were they gun
massacres, or was it?
Yes, they came in. There were a couple of Arabs who were dressed like religious Jews who had walked into a cafe that was not even a kosher cafe, which should have been a tip off to so many people. They were not even very well trained. They had I don't remember what particular firearm they had, but I remember reading that it had jammed. There would have been an opportunity at that point to shoot him if one of the civilians had been, one of the restaurant people at the restaurant had been armed. It's when I think about it, it sickens me because you're right. There are a number of places of attacks in Israel that could have been averted or that had people been armed. So
I stand corrected then. But it's good to talk about, even if the opening for the discussion of an important topic is me not knowing my facts, which happens.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
You're a good man, Adam.
Well, okay, can we at least say that in Israel, as opposed to many parts of the U.S., even if people aren't armed at the time, and the Israeli government could be much better about, they don't have the Second Amendment, but allowing people to arm themselves, responsible people who aren't committed to the killing of Jews, that the population at least is more self-defense savvy, if only because everyone serves in the military from certain ages, or pretty much everyone does, that they're more. Then
everybody in Israel should be, if they served and they don't have a record and they're good citizens, they should all be able to have a gun. Do you know that the Czech Republic is incorporating a Second Amendment into their constitution because the Czech president understands that the only way to fight terrorism is if citizens are armed?
You know what? Tell us more about that. It's funny, by the way. I keep talking about the Czech Republic, Poland, and Hungary when people say, "Oh, it's over for Europe." I say, "Wait a minute. There are a couple former Soviet bloc countries where they have their act together."
Right. It's over for Europe, but it's not over for Eastern Europe because they have a good memory of history. They know their history and they don't want to repeat it.
Well, tell us what's going on in the Czech Republic, like what the procedure has been over there.
I don't know. I just read about it the other. I knew that the Czech president had come out a while back saying that the only way to fight terrorism is if citizens are armed, because the police and the military and whatever else they have cannot be everywhere. But if potential terrorists or terrorists have to fear for their own lives, they're not going to so readily attack. They're going to go to soft targets. England has been a soft target. France will always be it has historically been a soft target. France is always going to be a soft target. They should be the laughing stock of the entire world, actually.
I'm actually of the belief that France is actually a little more dedicated to its own self-preservation than Germany and England are, to be honest. I mean, looking at it, they sometimes will use force when the other countries will not. I mean, I think Germany and England, the mentality is even more hopelessly gone. It's just that France has more Muslims now.
Well, that could be. I just don't. France doesn't have a sweet space in my heart. That's for sure.
No.
So I know that the Czech president had said that the only way, and it's logical. It's logical. It's common sense. And I just read the other day, and I haven't read all the details, other that they had determined that they are going to incorporate the right to bear arms into their constitution. The details of which I don't know. I would like to know whether they're going to allow open carry, whether they're going to. However, I don't know how they're going to handle it. I think that in the United States we should get over this business about guns, and bring it back into the schools. They can use air guns, and kids can learn to safely and responsibly handle a gun, and then they can go out and defend themselves if they have to. They won't even have to as much because they won't be soft targets. Part of the reason I think that in the United States we have not yet, keyword being yet, experienced some of the attacks that are happening, so frequently in England, and other places in Europe is exactly because there is a Second Amendment, and because terrorists really don't know exactly where they're going to be that they might encounter an armed citizen and die.
Look at Alexandria, Virginia. Only because someone was armed there, and that's true of so many massacres that have occurred. And they don't talk about that. The media doesn't talk about the person who ended the massacre. They leave that out, like, for example, Columbine that many years ago. And you know what's interesting also? Remember what the Japanese said about why they could never invade the American mainland. You know what I'm talking about there, right?
I do.
It was sparsely populated out west at that time. But they knew what was this? They would find a gun behind every blade of grass or something like that. And that certainly entered their strategy. I mean, I don't know if it would be feasible for Japan to do that anyhow, but you know what I mean.
When you mention Columbine and some of the other massacres, the first thing that always comes to my mind is the Virginia Tech massacre, where the professor, who was an Israeli and had served in the military, barred the door and then was killed. So he barred the door so that his students could get out the window, and then the guy got in and killed him. I will never forget, he was perfectly capable of handling a gun safely, but he had been disarmed because they did not allow gun. It was Virginia Tech was I imagine they still are, a gun-free zone. So he was not armed, and he died as a direct result.
Great point. Great point, and may he rest in peace. I think that the Chabad house there is now named after him, if I'm not mistaken. And what is it, Harrison?
I would rather he was alive and named after him out of gratitude.
Yes, of course. Or perhaps that we never would have heard of him unless we were a student in the first place.
And that would have been a good thing, right?
Yeah, that is. Any final thoughts, Doris-wise, about the American Revolution and the Second Amendment, or just any final thoughts you want to add in general?
I cannot stress enough, the more I'm involved in this, the more I realize and understand that that the best thing we have going is our Second Amendment, and that we have to all exercise it. And otherwise it atrophies, and that's what we see happening. And there are plenty of opportunities across the country for people to do that. We just had a class the other day, last Sunday, a skills and drills class. People who were on the newer side were given the opportunity to practice some fun skills and drills. And I have to tell you, everybody at the class had a great time, and I've already received 3 emails from people telling me that they are now going out to buy a gun. They're asking me for, where I think they should go, what I think they should get. I advise them to obviously research it and try different things out. To me, it shows that people, if they're exposed to it, they do it, they enjoy it, and they understand the importance of it. And I think everybody should do it.
And let's get practical information, how people can follow you, and also something you're doing that's female oriented, just the practical information now. I'm starting a group as part of my other groups, my several groups, called Ladies Can Shoot. We have a magnificently gorgeous logo, and these are going to be the classes are the same. They are going to be nuanced towards women, questions that they might ask, concerns they might have, but they're going to be ladies-only classes. The first one is on July 22nd, but we are still continuing all the classes for Jews Can Shoot, obviously, for everybody on different days. And you can find me and my classes at www.jewscanshoot.com, all one word. And we hope to see you. And if you can't come to my classes, go to other classes, but take good classes. All right. Doris Wise, great having you on as always.
Thank you, Adam.